Hey guys, welcome to Contemplation Blog 101. If you guys haven't seen my previous episodes, you guys should go ahead and see them. Today we're actually going to talk about redesigning the current city. Cities right now are plagued with issues ranging from pollution to resource management. There are even issues with traffic and stuff like that as well. These issues are only going to escalate as our population grows. Obviously, there needs to be a redesign in the way we make cities. Right now, the city is based on what I would like to call the spread out model. You know, how buildings kind of build outward rather than upward. I mean, yes, New York City does have some attempt to build buildings upward, but there's still shift to keep building outward somehow. Some way, shape, or form, there's still an outward trend. In most cities, they're still building outward for the most part. This method worked well when we were in the 1800s and early 1900s, maybe even up to the mid-1900s, but the model doesn't really work once the population increases. There are so many issues pertaining to it. I suggest that we should start building up or in another direction altogether. After all, cities that build outward not only damage the ecological structure around everything, but also don't really act very efficiently with traffic jams and everything else. Electrical grids are kinda it's very easy to damage the infrastructure and very difficult to actually maintain and fix the infrastructure because everything interrupts everything. Nothing's really that modulated, nothing's really that easy to understand. The whole city structure being built outward isn't very efficient in its own self. Now, normally I'm not the person that's just going to rant and rave that we need to do change, not say how we could possibly make some sort of redesign to our municipal developments. But I'm going to be the type that does offer a couple suggestions. Now, these are a bit far-fetched, but just follow with me, okay? My city design involves many of the futuristic technologies used in the Zeitgeist movement, actually. Some of the main advocates of the Zeitgeist movement like the idea of technology as the builder and technology as the innovator. And that's the foundation of my design. I think one of the biggest points of my redesign will involve smart grids and everything smart that is controlled by computer to help better manage resources as well as control other aspects of our infrastructure. And everything is also, I guess you could say, modulated in the sense where everything can be put together but also perform separately. Things together can work efficiently due to the smart grid, but by themselves can function just fine because of the modulated design. I also focus on how invasive the city is to the environment around it. I wanted to design a city that didn't really mess with the environment that it was touching. You know, many of the modern cities that are spread out have pavement all over the place, and they bombard just about all the natural wildlife in the area. I tried to make a city design that kind of went away from that kind of scheme. So that's another little point that I have with my new city design. It's also kind of pretty much given that the resources themselves will kind of be used as efficiently as possible, water preservation, everything else, but that's pretty much common knowledge nowadays. I mean, if you want to redesign a city now, that's pretty much on the table as it is, right? I mean, it's not like it's a new idea to recycle water or anything, right? So that's given. So what I propose is a city that in itself exists more like a tower. A tower in a sense that there's a great intricate grid of different modules. This array of modules would be interconnected but also available for maintenance on the outside. It would be kind of like an intricate cubed honeycomb, if you will, or net. It's a way of making a building that's easy to maintain and easy to upgrade. Each module for civil development could potentially share a different aspect of the city. There could be a city council module, and then there could be a residential module. And these modules in themselves will be fairly self-enclosed. pretty enclosed in themselves, so that there's easier ways to manage the environment and be more efficient on resources. These interconnected modules will be able to stack way high and continue to stack as the city grows. And as the city grows, the stacks become higher and higher and higher. And the way to keep these stacks from falling over, per se, kind of like a building, you know, there could be pretty efficient methods to keeping the whole city structure stable. And that would be by using ropes spanning out at different points of the height of that building at different intervals, so that there's an infinite way to stabilize the building. Now, these wires will be very thick and everything, but if you think about it in relative perspective, the amount of space required for those ropes versus what the space would be required with a traditional civil design would be much less, for sure. I mean, you can stack many huge stabilizing ropes on top of each other when compared to other things. In addition to this stacked design, where everything is basically built up and continues to be built up, modulated, there would also be something underneath the city as well. Think of it kind of as a bowl, I guess you could say, an ecological bowl. That bowl underneath the city, that is underneath the city obviously, would consist of different ecological preservation sites. And these sites could also be used for leisure and everything else, you know, brisk walks in the park and other stuff. And it would be bowl shaped so that it could actually control the amount of water consumed for the city around it, if that makes any sense. And there would also be ways to control flooding as well. Flooding itself could be the thing of the past, because the entire water table would be integrated into the landscape around it. Now, every single module will probably have, you know, a pretty basic standard of energy supply, and many of the energy supplies would actually come from a modulated state, so that only maybe one module can break down, and there isn't a whole grid that can cause a great collapse in the civil development. Only maybe 1 or 2 modules go off at any given time. Water, it's pumped from the grid as usual, but water infrastructure is many times less likely to break down than electricity, right? For the most part. And then waste, it could also be flushed in a similar fashion using gravity. Now here's another point about the civil design. Because everything's integrated and self-enclosed, the transportation in itself could be mostly pedestrian based. There wouldn't be really that much of a need for having a commuter vehicle. You could have one, they just wouldn't really have any purpose besides more of a land terrain vehicle, an all-terrain land vehicle. Something that is more for leisure and not necessarily for mandatory transport. This infrastructure design also doesn't really use very many roads or anything very similar. The whole idea of dedicating areas for transportation will be pretty much thrown out of the window with this design. And the emphasis on putting more of a dedicated mode of transportation as far as flight transportation is concerned to more of the forefront. The whole idea of land commuting is can kind of go out of the window with the design, and it's pretty favorable now because, let's face it, everybody these days wants to have a car, right? So it's only favorable to go with the future trend. So what do you guys think of the city design? I mean, I know it's a pretty crude model, and it's kind of out there, I guess you could say, but there is a lot of potential with the design as well. But what kind of issues do you think could come up with this thing? What kind of improvements could you say? Make sure to leave your thing in the comments, and be sure to subscribe to me. I'm making new episodes every week, if not every day. Alright, I'll see you guys later.